Welcome to the Veterans Archives podcast, where every veteran story is honored and celebrated. Join us as we delve into the rich histories and experiences of those who have served our nation. You can catch our podcast on all major podcast platforms, as well as every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Reads Across America Radio. At Veterans Archives, we believe your story matters. Visit our website at www.veteransarchives.org to explore more about our mission, discover resources for veterans, and stay updated on upcoming episodes. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn to engage with our community. Subscribe, like, and share to spread awareness about our veteran stories. Whether you're a veteran, a supporter, or simply curious about the profound journeys of those who have served, Veterans Archives invites you to listen in, learn, and be inspired. Join us as we continue to honor and preserve the legacies of our veterans. Today is September 4th, 2024, and we're talking with Dennis Flynn, who served in the United States Air Force and the United States Navy. And so, Dennis, we're going to start out real simple. When and where were you born?
Born in Detroit, October 24th, 1941, and grew up in Royal Oak, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. One of 7 kids, and had a great life growing up with my siblings, but I was the renegade in the family. First one to jump off the garage roof with a bed sheet when I was 12, and it doesn't work.
Right.
But growing up, I never took responsibility for my own actions. So I was always in trouble. It was always mischief, nothing really bad.
Where did you fall in the lineup there with 7
I was
kids?
second oldest.
Second oldest, okay. Yeah. So the first child was the one the parents worried about all the time.
Right.
And the second one sort of got away with stuff then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my older sister, I was buddies with my sister below me. There's about 3 years difference. And I told her at one time, of course, Mom couldn't keep track of me. And she would have my older sister was her XO.
Okay.
She couldn't keep all of us on track. And my sister and I just hated her. And when we were teens, we were trying to find a teenage hitman to take her out.
Oh, no.
There's nothing but humor in our family. And one time my sister looked at me, and we were at a family get-together, and she just burst out laughing, and she said, "I don't know how Mother stayed out of the asylum with you around." I was like, "Me? Yeah, I'm innocent, you know." She says that at 13, you took your tennis shoes off, put them upside down in the clothes chute that went down to the basement for laundry, left the door open and went downstairs and yelled up, Mom, I'm stuck." Well, she comes in, sees the bottom of my feet, wouldn't put it past me, and thinks I'm stuck there. And it was just stuff like that all the time, drove her nuts.
That's pretty inventive, right? I'm going to try that. I have a laundry chute at home.
I was always pranking, and finally my mother had me work with he was a milkman in Detroit, had the horse and wagon. I still use it. It was early 50s. And I was a pain in the butt to my dad, but he controlled me better. And that way it cut Mom some slack. Yeah. And my dad was a practical joker too, and I think that's where I got it. But when I was 14, I would hotwire my dad's car and cruise Woodward. Being a dumb kid, my way of thinking was, well, they can't give me a ticket because I don't have a driver's license.
Right.
But they could have pulled my license till I was 21. But it was always doing stupid things and not forethought.
Yeah.
I went to a parochial school. I hated school. And the thing I hated was you couldn't ask questions. It was very strict. And I hated math and everything. And the rein was too tight.
Right.
And when I got they ran out of nuns. They hired my aunt. She was a retired teacher. And she wound up flunking me because I kicked back thinking, well, she's my aunt. She's not going to fail me.
So when they ran, I got to ask a question though. Did they run out of nuns because of you?
Or they might have. I burned
I'm just
them
curious.
out.
Before we get too far though, I want to ask you a couple of questions. One is about your mom. Tell me a little bit about your mom, and maybe what's like one of your favorite memories? Like when you think about your mom, this would be your favorite thing about her.
With 7 kids in the family, we're all fussy eaters. And she was like an angel. She would cook one meal and everybody ate it whether you liked it or not. And like I hated lima beans. And she said, at least try it. If you don't like it, you don't have to eat it. But everybody had their likes and dislikes. Mm-hmm. And she was like a saint. She was very quiet. And usually the scolding and that was turned over to Dad, but very, very caring mother, and her grandmother or her mother was the same way, mm-hmm. And so it was my aunt that flunked me,
right?
Or I flunked myself, really,
right?
But I talked my folks into letting me go to public school. Mm-hmm. Now, I go in the 9th grade, but I'm already a year behind.
Right.
And
thanks to your aunt.
Yeah. And I got straight A's in history and all my shop classes and drafting and flunked everything. I didn't show up. There was, the school was so crowded, we had 2 shifts.
Oh.
Every half hour we'd change classes because half the school would change class, the other half hour the next. Mm-hmm. They were building a new high school, but I imagine the fire marshal would have gone nuts.
Oh, yeah.
And so they appreciated it when you skip school. And
that's almost like getting extra credit then.
Yeah.
Skipping school.
Yeah, if you show up, it's extra credit.
Well, I want to ask you about your dad, too, because you mentioned that he was the one that gave out the discipline. But what did your dad do for a living? And, what's maybe one of your favorite memories of your dad?
Well, as far back as I remember, he worked for a company called Cook's Coffee Company, and they delivered coffee to houses like a milk route. Mm-hmm. And then he got a chance to become a milkman and worked for Twin Pines, had his own route, and very customer-oriented. If he ran out of something, he'd go to the Borden's truck and trade, hey, I need a pound of butter, and the customer didn't care that much, but he always... If he ran out of something, he'd make sure they got it that day.
Right.
And he had a clientele that just loved him. I know he was busting his butt trying to raise all us kids and everything. And so he got into scouting with me at Boy Scouts. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of a chore. But one time he bought me a kite. Well, it turned out it's a target kite for the Army, and they're about 6 foot high. Uh-huh. And I about killed myself at 10 years old running up and down the street trying to get it airborne. And he took it back to the surplus store, and the guy said, oh, that's made tow behind a Jeep about 30 mile an hour.
And you were never going to run 30 miles an hour, were you?
No. But he did everything he could to support me, but I was just kind of a renegade.
Yeah.
I got a lot of spankings, and then as I got a little older, okay, you're confined to your room for the night. And one night I opened the window, snuck out with my buddy, and I come back and the storm window's locked in place. So I had to come in and, take a chewing for that. But I was always pushing the envelope.
Right.
And 3 months into the 10th grade, I thought, it's, at this rate, it's going to take me 6 years to get it through high school. So, and I've screwed up my life. Mm-hmm. And I just felt really down on myself. So I decided to go in the service. Always wanted to travel. So I went in the Navy in 1959.
So you didn't finish high school then?
Oh, no. I quit 3 months into the 10th grade.
So you left and then you went right into the Navy.
Yeah, I went into the Navy, and when I got to boot camp, we had a company commander was a retiring chief.
Uh-huh.
And he was an alcoholic, and we saw him 3 times in boot camp. So we our company put ourselves through boot camp. And I was even screwing with things there. You know, when you march, you were supposed to dig in your left heel to set a sound cadence.
Yep.
I'd get the guys around me to start digging, stay in step, but dig in your right heel, and then pretty soon we'd have the whole company messed up. Some petty officer would see us and drop and give us 50, and they'd, Flynn, you asshole, and everything.
Right.
And, you know, when you're 17, what's 50 push-ups? Nothing, you know.
Right. Well, and so World War II is pretty far behind us when you're in the
Korea,
Navy. And Korea's back there, and Vietnam really isn't on anybody's radar.
Nice time to join.
Yeah, so I can see where you're putting yourself through basic training.
And I think what made me think about the Navy is, as a kid, I saw the film of the Doolittle attack.
Yes.
Where the B-25s took off from the Hornet, and that bomber dipped out of sight and was skipping on the water and got airborne. Well, I joined the ship's, we have like a club, or, you know, association. And I was mentioning it. We'd had World War II vets then at meetings and that. And I mentioned that excited me. I thought, man, that's life. I want a carrier.
Right.
And he says, well, I was there at the Doolittle launch working the flight deck. And he says, Doolittle was a heck of a pilot. These are land-based bombers. He had the shortest runway, no catapults. And he says, just before they launched, somebody walked into a prop. Well, that's like falling in a tree mulcher. It shredded them. Doolittle saw it and was so shook up, but now it's time to launch. He said, if you look real close, his flaps are up. They need to be down to get that lift at low speeds. And so the wind dropped out from under him when he cleared the deck, but he is such a good pilot. He quickly hit the flaps. And
so that's why he was skipping off the water.
The tail was actually skipping on the water. It had dropped so far. And I said, that was an impressive film, and it locked the Navy in for me.
So you go to boot camp, you managed to not get thrown out or get in too much trouble. Right. So then, what was your job, and did you go to some kind of schooling right after basic training?
No, out of there I was assigned to I wanted submarines, but I went to the USS Hancock. It was built in '44. It was an Essex class carrier, and they assigned me to the E division. I was IC electrician, which is interior communications, sound phones, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I worked in that rating for 4 or 5 months. I really enjoyed it. And but they had a V6 division, was squadron support, maintenance, and all that. And we supported the squadrons with the equipment they needed. And we also drove the tractors and the little Jeeps on the flight deck. So I switched over, but being the renegade, I went to the V6 division chief and said, I'd like to transfer. I want to work as a mechanic. And so he signed my transfer slip. I went to the V6 division officer, which is a major, or in the Army.
Lieutenant commander, right?
Lieutenant commander, and he signed it. Then I took it to the E division, my assigned division, and I got my butt chewed royal because I went backwards through the chain of command.
Oh.
But I wanted to lock in the other one first. And so he chewed me out for not following it. And so get the hell out of here, and I went down there. But I always grew up because we weren't allowed to ask questions. And in grade school and that, I always questioned things. I would pick up junk like old clocks and play with the gears and all that stuff.
Right.
And so I'm in the V6 division. We're still in port in Alameda. And I was in town at a Radio Shack, and they had oscilloscopes that just come out for checking cars, electric, like plugs and all that.
Yeah.
And they had a kit. So I bought one. Now, I'd never been to electronics. I had a basic electrical school. And these guys, our technicians, we also did radio support for the aircraft too. Mm-hmm. So I went and talked to the electronic guys. And I said, look what I got, I'm going to build. Oh, you'll never build that. And I said, well, it's a kit, it's got instructions. 2 weeks later, I got it all built and running, and they're just blown away. And another project I did, I had a AM radio, that pocket one, and the circuit board broke.
Uh-huh.
And they said, oh, it's all balanced, you won't be able to fix it. Well, we had those Mickey Mouse ears on the flight deck. I split the radio, used wires to extend the circuit boards, put half in each ear, and I had a radio headset up on the flight deck. The only problem is every time the radar went around, you got this huge buzzing in your ears. Right. So, but it worked.
You were ahead of your time. That was like the first Walkman, and you didn't even know it.
I know. And it was just, it's like that movie where the kid says, I see dead people.
Yes.
Well, I see things different than other. To me, you can't fix it as a challenge.
Right.
And in fact, in 6th grade, there's one nun that I just loved. We were doing medieval drawings for school. And the guys are doing the knights in armor, and the girls are doing princesses. I did a picture of a broadsword, but I put a real light line down the center of the blade and shaded one side real lightly. And she came up and looked at it, and she says, you see dimensionally. I said, what do you mean? I said, that's what it looks like. The light reflects different off the two angles.
Right.
And I've had 80-some cars over the years, and a kit car I built was like an MG, but it had a piano hinge down the hood. Mm-hmm. And stainless steel, straight slotted screws every inch on each side. And my ex-wife came out one day and looked at it, and all the slots were lined up front to rear. You could drop a piano wire right in there.
Yeah.
And she says, you are a nitpicker. I said, well, if one screw was out of whack, and I walked up on this car never seeing it, I would go right to that. There's a flaw. I'm not an engineer. I don't even want to go there. But
right.
I said, that's the way I see things.
Yeah.
I'd go to a car show, and these guys put $10,000 worth of chrome, but the bolts holding the fender are rusty or crummy looking. I says, well, a little crudely, but to me, that's like going to the bathroom not wiping.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to finish the job,
finish the job.
Yeah.
And she threatened to buy me an old sweater with the little fur balls on it. She says, that way you can sit there, watch TV, and pick the nits off it.
Nice.
But I enjoyed my...
how long were you in the Navy? How long did you serve?
It was a total of 6.
Okay.
And...
did you do it all on the Hancock?
Well, 59 through 65. I got off the ship the day of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, my goodness.
23rd of October, 62.
Uh-huh.
I went into a reserve squadron with P-2Vs. Mm-hmm. And we did coastal patrols and all that stuff. And one time our landing gear wouldn't come down, and the hydraulics went out or something, and you have a mechanical crank to get them down. Well, that was jammed. So the pilot told us, I'm going to fly around, burn off our fuel, and you have the choice of, I'll fly slow and over the base, and you guys can bail out, or you can ride it in. They're going to foam the runway. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I've never jumped out of an airplane. Don't care to. I'll ride it in. So we had a belly it in, and we all walked away without a scratch. The guy was a great pilot. And but I enjoyed that. And then when I got done with 6, I was out, and the riots in Detroit were going on. I had an 18-month-old kid and a pregnant wife.
Yeah.
And I thought, I had stopped a couple times in Colorado Springs, going back and forth to the coast on flights. And I liked it out there. So I went out and got a verbal promise of a job as a mechanic at a Dodge dealer. Packed everything up, got there, and the guy didn't remember me.
Well, I want to ask you a question, though, before we get there. Was it tough to convince your wife to move to Colorado? Or was she, because of everything going on, was she like on board with it? I'm just curious.
She was for it, too. She was concerned about all the craziness going on in Detroit and everything. And we lived in Royal Oak, so it was unseen to us except on the news. But it seemed like the world, like now, the world's going crazy. Everybody's shooting everybody.
Right.
And so we moved out there, and the guy didn't remember me, but went ahead and hired me.
Let's take a quick break.
Veterans Archives is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we rely on donations from our listeners. If you are enjoying these stories and would like to support our continued efforts, please go to www.veteransarchives.org and select the donate button. Thank you. You got out there and he just was like, I don't know what you're talking about?
Yeah, because it was 2 months later. And,
okay.
And he didn't remember me.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I'd leased my house here to my brother-in-law and sister, so I had a fallback position in case things didn't work out. And so I get out there and I'm working at a Dodge dealer. On my 32nd birthday, one of the customers came in and was telling me about the fire department. And their starting wage was better than what I was making. And I was the manager of the shop. So on my 32nd birthday, I went down and there was 350 people taking this test, a lot of them college kids. And I'm 32, and I'm thinking, I don't stand a chance. Turned around, walked about 2 blocks away, and I thought, oh, hell, it's my birthday.
You might as well, right?
Big thing in my life, because I turned around and I placed 3rd highest on the written test. And it was just everything, but it was a lot of mechanical stuff. And these college kids, a draw knife is a curved chisel that you pull toward you with 2 handles. And they'd look at that, and the choices were a hammer, a hacksaw, a file, or they called it a draw knife or a spoke shave.
Yeah.
And they're sitting there scratching their head, and I thought, that's so damn obvious. It's not a hammer, right? It's not a file, but they'd never seen one. And it wasn't they were stupid. They just never been exposed to it. So I came out real good on that. But I got on. I was one of 16 hired at the time, and that. There was 580 guys on the fire department, and they had just built Station 11. And so I got on, and I was on about 2 years. We were all EMTs, and we had a call, very critical, had to cut a gal out of a car. She went into cardiac arrest twice, got to the hospital, we got her back, and it scared the hell out of me because I didn't know anything past EMT.
Yeah.
And I remember after we got out of the hospital, they did save her. We got to the hospital. I went outside. It was middle of winter, and I've got my bunker pants with just T-shirt, and I'm sitting there shaking, but it wasn't cold. And I thought, I got to do better than this. And so I applied and went to paramedic school. And they just sent a group through for the training, and then they had one opening, and I had to go by myself, 75-mile commute to Denver every day. And I struggled. And I had to learn the metric system, all that stuff.
Well, is this right around the time, Dennis, when paramedics were just kind of becoming something? Like, because I remember as a kid, watching, what was it, Emergency, Squad 51, right?
Yeah,
Because
Johnny and Gage or whatever.
Yeah,
it was.
Johnny Gage and his buddy there. So is this right around that same time, isn't it?
Yeah, just after that. Yeah.
So you were kind of on the cutting edge of being a paramedic.
Right, and we were taught to do chest tubes, crikes where you go in through the throat for airways. I wound up doing the first in Colorado Springs infield amputation of a leg.
Oh my gosh!
And
even a rebel is a paramedic then, kind of.
yeah, well, we had a guy with his leg smashed between cars. We couldn't get him out, and he was getting real shocky. I talked to the ER doc, and to me, it was a mechanical procedure.
Yeah.
And what was bizarre is he says get a good tight tourniquet on his upper leg, and it was smashed about 6 inches below his knee. And it was enough cars that it'd be at least an hour before we can get him pried apart, even with the jaws. So he said, well, you're going to have to take it off. He said, it's obvious we're not going to save the leg.
Right.
And so I get the tourniquet on, I get the scalpel out of our OB kit, I cut the meat, and 2 firemen are there throwing up, and I'm trying to hold it back.
Oh, yeah. This has got to be really difficult.
And then I get to the bone, and I thought, what the hell am I going to do with the bone?
Right.
And you can't use a power saw, you can't get in there.
Yeah.
And the only thing we had to cut, which we changed later real quickly, was old rusty hacksaw in our toolbox for the truck.
Might as well.
But I figured, well, they're going to debride it, clean it anyway, so what the heck. So I had to take the bone with a hacksaw. Now the guys are throwing up again, and I'm trying to hold it in.
Right.
And we get him to the hospital, and they, save the rest of his leg.
Yeah.
And then I got the doctors mad because they're trying to decide whether they're going to go above his knee or below. And one's arguing for below, one's for above. And I says, no pun intended, but do you guys get paid by the foot? Like the length of the leg.
Right.
And the one doctor came unglued, and the other one knew what I was asking.
Right.
He says, no, below or above, one way the prosthetic will give you like drop foot, and the other one works more natural. I said, okay, fine. That, but the other one thought, are you getting paid for each inch you take? But I was always pushing people's buttons anyway. But I love the job because we still did firefighting. Yeah. And every time you went out the door, it was different, totally different. It could be a fire and all that, or medical. Over 25 years, I got stabbed twice and shot once, and blown out of buildings 4 times in backdrafts. And people think you're you're nuts because you're trying to get in where everybody's trying to get out.
Right. You're running to the sound of the gun.
And so you're cranked up on adrenaline. You open a door, gets fresh air, boom, it blows you out 30 feet. Well, you're all padded as long as you don't land on that air tank.
Yeah.
And you brush yourself off like, all right, firefight, and you run back in. And to me, it was like being in combat. Yeah. And I loved firefighting. And if it was slow around this station, we were busy pranking each other all the time. And somebody says it's like a bunch of 12-year-olds put in a warehouse
unaccompanied,
unattended for 24 hours. You think of stuff to do.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I was always into cars, old cars or hot rods. But I loved that job. And
now, how long were you in Colorado then?
I moved out there probably in 71. And in 97, I moved back here.
Okay. At what point in there, we haven't heard about the Air Force
yet.
So I've been trying to figure out what point in here were you part of the Air Force?
Well, I think it was around 72. I got to thinking, I've already got 6 years in the Navy.
Right.
Why don't I go back in, finish my 20, and get another retirement going? And so they didn't have any Navy there. Well, they had a Quonset hut on a lake with 12 reservists and a twin 5-inch gun. And their weekend would be spent cranking a gun around, pretending they're shooting Japanese Zeros or something.
Sounds really exciting.
Yeah. Fort Carson, that was out of the question. Walking around in a cracker jack suit in a huge Army base. Wasn't going to cut it. And then we had the Air Force Academy north of us and Peterson Air Force Base and NORAD. So I checked with Air Force, and they had a rating as a firefighter.
Oh.
And I was a firefighter, paramedic. What the heck? I went over. And I got out of the Navy as a E5, and within a couple of years, I'd made E7 in the Air Force. It was wide open.
Yeah.
And my job for my 2 weeks was go out and inspect radar sites and missile silos. And I worked for Air Defense Command, and but I was working with the fire department and doing training and all kinds of stuff. We had a civilian chief, and then I was the deputy fire chief. And he used to chew me out all the time. Young guys be doing housework. I'd grab a mop and he'd say, "You're belittling the rank." I say, "Yeah." I says, "I can't." I says, "I hated supervisors that had that coffee cup welded to their finger."
Right.
And I said, to me, if I give an order, we got hose to test. We means me too. I'm part of that team. Now I have the choice of standing back and watching them or doing the light part of the job. But I'll tell you, and my stepson in the Army was the same way. He's a lieutenant colonel, and he's humping freight with the E1s. You know?
I think sometimes you have to do that. I mean,
it was just in my nature. It's just, but you lead by example.
Yes.
And
exactly.
I don't think I ever gave a direct order except once my whole time, and I spent 25 more years in the Air Force. I loved it, and I'd go out on my 2 weeks. I was my own boss. I'd write a 1-paragraph report. Had a lot of adventures at the different places I went, all over the U.S. And I just loved that job. And the city would give me my paycheck, and the Air Force would give me theirs.
Right.
I was allowed 2 weeks a year, but they never tracked it. So there's many years I went 3 times during the year.
Well, it sounds like you were. So it sounds like you were kind of in at a great time to be in the military, right?
Yeah.
Because they're really. We were
over there in Vietnam and flying missions.
Yeah.
I did get a chance to go up in an AD as the forward air observer was sick. I knew the pilot pretty well, and he says, "Come on, you go with me." So been on a combat mission, and we come back with a few holes in the plane.
What was that like for you?
Scary,
yeah,
but it was fantastic at the same time.
Right.
And doing close air support and everything else. And the flight deck, I loved it. And that's the only time I gave a direct order. I was almost 19. There's a guy had hitchhiked home to Detroit. And we're friends, but not real tight buddies. And I told him, "We've got to launch. We got to be up there at 5 o'clock, check our tractors, launches at 6 a.m., get some sleep, because we're going to be up there 72 hours once we start."
Right.
So, yeah. And he played pinochle all night. In the morning, we couldn't see him while we're checking tractors. He's inside the island in a corner sleeping. Now the launch is starting. I needed everybody on the deck. And I had broken the crew into 3 groups. I had 3 4-man groups. And I had 2 other senior guys running the other 2. And that way, if you send one group to chow, tell them to go together, come back together, and these guys are waiting on you.
Right.
Because everybody's missing meals and everything else when I took over. And his crew leader came in and he says, "I've tried waking Bruce up. He, doesn't pay any attention, goes right back to sleep." So I went in there and I booted him in the butt. I said, "Bruce, get your ass on that tractor now." Yeah. And he got up and he's like a 12-year-old. He's throwing a tantrum because I interrupted his sleep. He jumps on the tractor and floors it. Well, it's 8,500-pound tractor. Got lead blocks for fenders, and it's a diesel engine, and it's a gas turbine on the back. We just topped them off. 30 gallons of aviation gas, 28 gallons of diesel fuel. His job was to start the second plane, the one behind the catapult. So he would drive up, go past the front of the plane, then back in on the right-hand side, hook up a hot air hose to start him. Well, he goes roaring up the deck. Well, there's guys rolling bombs and rockets, sidewinders, and everything all over. It's a busy place, and he's going like hell. So I'm headed up there to chew his butt out. He turns in front of the plane, and I see the wheels lock up. They had spilled some oil, wiped it up with rags, but it
at least
still
with
slick.
film. Yeah.
And I'm about 10 feet from him. Jets are going. I can't hear anything. And he just keeps going. He hits the railing and goes over the side, lands on the quarterdeck about 60 feet below. And it blows up. And it burnt the wipers off the pilot house, which are above the bridge.
Right.
And the fire was out in 3 minutes. Some second class on the hangar deck, the bay doors were open, saw it, grabbed a salt water line, had a guy turn it on, he dragged the hose out, and he flushed it over the side, the fuel.
Right.
And it was out, but, he was killed. So my second class come up there, and he says, and he's later 20s, he said, well, you got to go identify the body. I said, well, I was 10 feet from him when he went over. He was looking at me, yelling for help. Well, you got to do it. And I'd heard all these stories, burnt body smell and all that.
Yeah.
So I steeled myself for it. The only dead person I'd ever seen was my grandmother laid out. So I go into sick bay, and he's all drawn up, and burnt badly. There's a belt buckle and a sole of one shoe left on him.
Yeah.
Looked more like a department store dummy that had been in a fire. And no smell, or that I knew.
Yeah.
And I says, I know it's him. I saw him go. You'd never recognize him the way he looks now, but that's him. I said, okay, thank you. And I went out, and I thought, that wasn't so bad. Went down the passageway about 10 feet, wound up waking up on the floor. And I thought, wow. And our compartment was about 2 bulkheads back. So I went in and sat on my rack, and I started shaking for about 20 minutes. Just, it hit me.
Yeah.
But at that age, like, God, you got blown away or got killed in a car wreck, and you move on. And then it hit me, hell, we got work to do. So back to the flight deck, and we're too busy to even talk about it.
Right.
And so we're up there for 72 hours, and it's a bad thing and all that, but that's why sergeants don't get to know their guys real good. You lose them, and it hurts too bad,
Yeah.
But a couple of years later, I was talking to my best friend, who was the crew leader that came in and told him, and we still stay in contact. He's down in Fort Smith. He says, I feel like I caused his death because I reported him and told him to get out there. And I said, well, I'm the one that got him out there, and I feel responsible. But I said, common sense tells me I told him to do his job. He acted like a kid, caused his own death, and it was circumstances like the oil.
Right.
Well, 10 years later, just before I went in the Air Force, it was bothering me. I went to the VA, and I said, I wake up about 4 times a week, and I've got this Technicolor movie from the time I wake him up till I identify the body.
Yeah. And
I'm not sweating or screaming or nothing, but I'm wide awake in the night shot. And she said, well, you got PTSD. I says, other than that deal in the airplane, I was never really shot at.
Right.
So what's that? She says, everybody has a degree of PTSD. I said, really? She says, Picture a 15-year-old girl gets in an elevator by herself. A guy in a blue coat walks in, stops the elevator, molests her, and then leaves. To her, that thought is so terrible, it goes way to the back of her mind, and she refuses to think about it. Now, 20, 30 years later, you put on a lie detector. Have you ever been molested? Oh, no. And she'll pass. It won't go there. But it has changed her life. Every time somebody gets in an elevator with a blue jacket on, she's white knuckles.
Yeah.
Maybe your little brother used to beat you up. And because you're older, you didn't want to hurt him. But you took that and that changed your life. Or different events.
Yeah, anyone.
But everybody has it one way or another.
Right. You don't have to serve in combat or be in the military.
Well, now working with veteran courts, these guys have come up and they look like they've been living in a dumpster for 2 years.
So hold that thought.
Okay.
Because I want to get there. Yeah, I want to get there. I enjoyed it the whole time I was in. They treated me good. The VA here in Lansing is incredible. And this county, I'm constantly getting young kids and older people thanking me for my service. I've never seen a response like that before. And I'll thank them for thanking me. And the young kids especially, I'll tell them, it's so nice that people are aware of the sacrifice that veterans do and that. Make them feel they're doing good too, so they keep it up and pass it on. But there's, I was in the era too, like you, where when guys came back from Vietnam, people spit on them, called them baby killers. It's pretty hard to take after you've been getting shot at or wounded for your country. Right.
And
you're doing the heavy lifting and the hard work, and then
they're spitting on you.
Yeah.
You're better off being a garbage man. They just ignore you.
Right. Right. Exactly.
But
So you were you were living in Colorado. You're a firefighter. You're in the Air Force as a firefighter as well, and so all of this is going on. So how long were you there then?
I was about 30 years in Colorado.
Okay. So you retired out of
the Air Force, and I got a divorce and retired from the fire department all in about a week.
That's a lot of change for 1 week.
And my wife and I, looking back, we married our best friend.
Yeah. And
it was a lonely marriage. We never argued or fought, raised the kids on the same page, but it just nothing going on.
Right.
And so when I retired, I sat down with her and told her my feelings that I would like to move on with my life. And she was real upset at first because all the plans you make, they're gone. We're going to do this when we retire and all that. The next day she came up to me and she says, my mother and I and my sister were out in Monterey this summer. They went out for a weekend or something. And I was sitting on the beach with my mom and told her there was something wrong and I couldn't put my finger on it, but if it didn't change the next year, I was going to ask for a divorce. And so we'd been thinking the same thing.
Right. You just never said it.
We split everything down the middle. I says, you get half my retirement unless you remarry. Other than that, the equity of the house, the whole thing. And we moved on. I moved back here. Now, Patty, my present wife, I met her in the 6th grade when I flunked 6th grade. and she was, I was always real shy, but she always, and I was a goof off, just drawing attention away from me or whatever. And, but she would say, how come you act so goofy? But she was a friend, very good friend.
Yeah.
She cared about me, and I noticed that. And she's pretty cute, too.
That's a bonus.
And it came to 8th grade, I wanted to take her to the dance, the graduation dance. And I told her, when a guy asks a girl on his first date, he feels he's in the middle of the Briggs Stadium, spotlights are on him, the stadium's crowded, and they're just waiting for him to get shot down.
Right.
It is so stressful on a guy. Most guys,
I remember
if they
those
really
days.
admit it.
Yeah.
Well, I asked her a week before the dance, and she had a date. Well, I still wanted to take her, so I showed up at the dance. I thought, I'm at least going to dance with her. I couldn't dance worth a damn, but and her date was over at the punch bowl. 8th grade guys don't dance either.
Right. It's universal.
So I danced every dance with her. Her date got mad and left. Didn't confront me or nothing. He just left. So I walked her home. When I came home from boot camp, I dated her a few times, and she was going through cosmetic school with my buddy's sister, Kathy.
Uh-huh.
And our families have always been connected. And we dated and really got to liking each other. And then we corresponded when I was at boot camp. I came back, and we dated some more. And I went to the San Francisco to my ship. And we wrote back and forth another month or two, and then I asked her to marry me.
Uh-huh.
First, I'd written a letter to my dad. My dad saved it. But, Dad, I've met this wonderful girl. I'm thinking to ask her to marry me, and I'm asking him for his advice, but at the same time, I'm scared of getting married.
Right.
And I don't have any idea what I'm getting into. And he saved that letter and gave it to us when we got married.
Oh, that's incredible.
Anyway, I wrote her back and asked her to marry me, and her folks says, he's 17, you're 17, or she had just turned 17. Mm-hmm. And I don't want you pregnant on a base and him out floating around in the Pacific.
Right.
Wait till he gets out of the service. And, well, it fizzled out. But I always had an 8x10 of her in my locker door. Mm-hmm. And I told her that the guys would come by, hey, if she ever dumps you, I want her phone number. And
in true Navy fashion, by the way. True Navy fashion, right?
And she said, no, they didn't. And then Jim, that friend of mine, he says, oh, yeah. He says, I was the first one to ask for your number, too. And so anyway, when I got divorced, I moved back here.
So I don't want to lose this point. Like, you met this girl, and you had this whole relationship, and then it just sort of went away.
Yeah, it kind of fizzled out.
And you lived a whole lifetime, really,
right,
without her.
27 years with another woman.
That's a lifetime.
Yeah.
And then you moved back to Michigan.
And I went to the Dream Cruise, and I ran into her.
It truly was a dream cruise.
And she had been divorced 2 years.
Yeah.
So I started dating her, and as soon as I saw her, I was on the hunt. Mm-hmm. And one day I bought her 24 long stem roses, took them over, and we went down to Wampler's Lake. There's a bar called Jerry's. It's an old place, and they have a deck overlooking the lake. Uh-huh. And I took her to dinner down there, and the sun was setting behind her. It was a Pacific sunset, beautiful.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I said, I asked you 32 years ago if you'd marry me. Have you made up your damn mind yet? And she said yes.
So she waited till you got out of the service.
Yeah, but her ex was an alcoholic, and she had problems with him and everything. Got 3 wonderful kids out of it.
Yeah.
And so she agreed to marry me. And in '99, we got married on the 3rd of July. Now, we just had our 25th anniversary, and she got a mass at church, and we renewed our vows. Mm-hmm. I did my part of the vows, and then I looked at her, I says, I was married for 27 years before, and I can't even remember that marriage. I said, all I know is when you're back in my life, I've never been happier. It's made my life complete. Wow. She got so choked up she couldn't say her vows.
Oh, no.
But, and once I got rid of that I was short-tempered and everything else. Yeah. Once that PTSD cleared up, I'm the happiest camper in the world.
Yeah.
I'm not religious. I mean, I am, but I'm not. And I wake up in the morning, it could be a blizzard or pouring rain or a beautiful day like today. I just look up and thank God for another day.
Right.
With all the things that I've been through, with my body, I feel like Indiana Jones. And Patty keeps saying God's got a mission for you, but I don't remember doing anything really big. So, but I take it one day at a time, and like the veterans I count, I'm a mentor in the court.
So let's talk about that. So you've done some things since you retired, other than marrying the woman of your dreams that you put off for almost 30 years. So what have you been doing since? And so just so the audience knows, we talked a little bit about this in the phone calls that we've had, where you do things with veterans courts. How did that come about, and what are you doing with that today?
Well, I met a Marine. I keep starting to say ex-Marine, but they're always correct.
No such thing.
Yeah.
My stepfather was a Marine.
Oh, yeah.
He served in Korea.
And of course, we harass each other all the time. But
so you met this Marine.
He asked me if I'd be interested in getting in on this. And it was just starting the Livingston courts, where these guys that are locked up for non-felony things, usually a 2-year term in jail, too many DUIs or abusive behavior in a family and all that kind of stuff. Well, I started out about 8 years ago on it, and what they wanted was mentors, guys that had been there, done that, because a veteran won't listen to a civilian.
Right.
Because we've been there and done that, and they haven't. They don't trust the court, because that's a government. Even the court-appointed attorney, they don't think they're on their side. They're just going to rat them out and all that kind of crap. But I learned right off, they can sit, we can go have coffee one-on-one without the court. Anything they tell me stays with me, unless they're suicidal, and I have to report that.
Right.
But I'm just a go-between, a former military buddy, say, and this is the court. Now, they'll ask me advice, and I try to get as much information or feedback for them as I can to help them along, plus my worldly wisdom, I guess you want to call it.
You've been around the block a few times.
Yeah.
Right.
And so usually I'll get some guy who looks like he's been living in a dumpster. And I mean, their appearance, not all of them, a lot of them are real clean cut, but just average guys.
Yeah.
And they're just having a hell of a time trying to get off of drugs or alcohol and all that. And they said, well, the Army did this to me. I said, no, wait a minute. I said, the Army taught you the discipline and all this kind of stuff. But say you're over in Vietnam and your best friend gets blown away right in front of you. That's pretty traumatic. How did you handle it? Well, we'd go back to base and get drunk. I said, well, it's kind of logical. You know, you're very upset. Beer's a tranquilizer. It's also habit forming and a crutch. Now, that made you feel better and you got through it. Well, something bad happens again, or maybe later in life, think, gotta remember that helped me through it. So you go have another beer, and you start picking up the habit, getting through the, you know, every time you get in a bind, you go to your pillow.
Right.
And it's a crutch. And then maybe that leads to drugs. And you're very dependent on both of them now. And you're making bad choices. And I'm not saying don't ever have a beer, but don't use it.
Right.
And I says, I got a little sticker somewhere, I don't know where it is now, but it says, don't blame me for the road you're on, it's your own asphalt. And after they get through the program, they say, I see the wisdom in that.
Yeah.
I says, you did it to yourself. And there's an old corny saying, you can't love others till you love yourself. And it shows. You don't shave, you don't take a bath for a month, you wear raggy, dirty-ass clothes. You don't care what you look like. You don't care about yourself. first thing you got to do is have faith in yourself and think positive. And I says, what's changed my life is I don't hang around negative people. Mm-hmm. I don't watch the news because it's all negative. To me, politics I hate, but that's me. I says, but I had a neighbor who used to worry about the poor starving kids in Africa. And one day I says, are you going to go over and teach them how to plant crops? Oh, I couldn't do that. I says, you're going to donate money to feed them? Oh, I can't afford that. I says, then be a human being, feel empathy for them, feel sorry for them, and then let it go. Anything you cannot change, don't worry about it. What happened 5 minutes ago is history. If you screwed up, you screwed up. You can't change it. It's already done. Right. Look toward the future. And the biggest thing is don't hang around negative people. And I said, I had a 97-year-old guy tell me one day, he says, I've never hated anybody. I says, that's a really broad statement. And he says, well, first of all, he said, I wasn't brought up prejudiced. You could be purple, green, black, brown, don't matter. We're all human beings trying to share this planet. He said, now you go from there, you go along, there's road rage or somebody's a real jerk to you. He says, don't let them bother you. Mm-hmm. Don't get involved in it, just ignore it and move on. Because all that's doing is adding stress to you. And I said, I always looked at it, if a guy's a real ass and give me a bunch of crap, I figured, okay, that's the way he is. But he's got to live inside of that guy and he'll look at him every morning when he gets up and looks in the mirror. So I just disregard it. And he says, you know, if they're doing it to get a rise out of you or a reaction, or just that's the way they are. Mm-hmm. And he says, let them deal with their problem, don't make it yours. And I said, it has changed my life so much. It's like the guy that's born again or whatever. Oh, yeah. And I says, people are always remarking, how come you're always smiling? I says, because I'm a happy camper. I'm enjoying life. Yeah. VA will say, you ever been suicidal? I said, I've never had a thought about it. I dealt with it as a paramedic and I couldn't understand it. People are in a different state of mind. But myself, I couldn't even imagine doing it. I want to see what's around the corner.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you a question. So since you've been working with the Veterans Court, how many veterans do you think you've helped? How many people have you...
It's usually a 2-year program. Uh-huh. And so I've been in it 8 years. I've had probably 5 or 6 different guys. Yeah. My last one was 73. He'd been shot in the hips in Vietnam, paralyzed. And he says he belonged to one of the veterans groups, VFW or whatever, and would go to the bar and sit there and drink, and you tell the same old war stories one after the other. That's the bad thing I hear from the courts is they have to go to AA, and they have the round table discussions. Yeah. And he says, you hear the same story every week from the same guys. And he says, it never changes, and it's really boring for them. Mm-hmm. But they do a breakaway groups, it's different. But he says, and I realized they didn't care about me. I didn't care about them once we left the bar. We were drinking buddies, and that was it. I just wanted company. And he was lost his license and kept getting DUIs. That's how he got in court. Nicest guy in the world. His wife had left him 10, 15 years ago. He raised 2 daughters on his own. Mm-hmm. The VA finally fit him with a leg brace where he can get around better. But he did construction. Now he works for Habitat for Humanity, refurbishing houses for nothing. Right. He's 100% disabled, so he's got an income. But he raises chickens and Cornish game hens and a couple of cows and lives by himself. Well, one daughter lives with him now, but Nice guy in the world. Didn't have any mental problems other than his drinking, so he was a breeze.
Yeah.
But I've had them that were highly educated, and they would justify everything, which was part of their habits.
Right.
We had one guy that was brilliant, and he was always quoting Greek philosophers or something. He was way over my head, but he'd screw up his drug test, and he came in, and the judge says, "You blew your test. You know, this was your first test, and you blew it, and you're just starting out." And he says, "Well, I didn't use my drug of choice." And she just dropped her jaw like, "What?" You know, like, "Well, I used cocaine rather than marijuana," or something like that.
Right.
It's like, that doesn't make it right.
No, that's
So-
true.
So she extended his community service and all that.
Uh-huh.
Well, they're going through this thing. He and his wife had joined a church, and it seemed some oddball church, and one of the leaders of the church got hooked on his wife, and they were telling him the devil was in him and all that. He wasn't following things, and they excommunicated him or something. And it turned out that the church worker had an affair going with his wife.
Oh, no.
So they got a divorce, and then about a year later, he got remarried, and he brought his girlfriend to court with him one time. I'm not sure if she was a transvestite or not. There was something about her just looked weird. They were married a week, and he caught her going out, had some other guy in bed with her, so that fell through.
Wow.
On top of his PTSD.
Yeah.
And he finally got a job at the GM Proving Grounds working on the test drive dummies. I thought, I wonder if he's the dummy. You know? But he finally got it together. But
Yeah.
The guy was very well educated. So it's all, you don't have to be a construction worker. It's people.
Right. And people are going to
And
be
everybody's
people.
different.
Well, so as we've talked about your whole life, if you think about it, from the time you were about 17 right up till us sitting here talking now, you have really led a lifetime of service to people. And you talk about not being around negative people and having a positive attitude and doing things for other people. You know, I think the audience should know, as we sit here, that you've had your own host of health issues, and you have one functioning lung, and still, I mean, I can tell when I talk to you on the phone, you're smiling the whole time we're talking.
Oh, yeah.
But we've sat here and talked about a lot of things. We had bagels together before we even started recording, and even as you were telling about these things that were going on in your life, you still had a smile on your face.
Yeah.
And that really says a lot for who you are, because you do all of these things, where some people might just sit down and go, you know, I've got one lung and I've had heart problems and this and
depression.
that. Yeah, and I'm like, you don't even do that. You're like, hey, I got one lung, but I'm still going to go out and help these people. Or,
Well,
you know.
when I first moved to Colorado with a 18-month-old and a pregnant wife,
Yeah.
the guy said, I did take it internally. I wound up in the hospital a week later with a super colon attack. It would go right to my guts. And I pushed through it. Paramedic school, I had a hell of a time getting through it, but I pushed through it.
Right.
Maybe it's the drive I inherited and trying to prove myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do a job or something, I always do the best that I can. I nitpick it.
Right.
Because I don't want anybody to belittle my work, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like a personal feeling or pride in the work. I've always built like model cars and all that. I build, I'll show you later, and then Tools for Vets got some models, military models, ships and so forth. And I just detail them like crazy. I've repaired computers for years, all self-taught. You know, replaced motherboards or build them or whatever. Worked on cars, built engines, painted my own cars, did my own welding. It was all self-taught. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is ask somebody to show you how to do it.
The people that are good at it, a lot of times they want to tell you. They want to share that knowledge with you.
Now, I learned to stick weld, and a real welder, there's 15, 20 different kinds of rod for different types of steel and all that. Well, the only thing I really knew was if the rod's sticking, it's not hot enough, and if it melts through, it's too hot.
Right.
But I can get the job done. I can torch weld or braze real good. And, but it was just learned by screwing up.
Right.
You're not going to do it perfect every time. And to me, when somebody says you can't fix it, that's a challenge. Because of parochial school, you can't do that. I thought, why? Don't ask.
Right.
Well, I'm going to ask. And but I hate math.
Do you think that follows through with your work with veterans? Because I think a lot of times people are like, this guy is hopeless. Like, you're not going to be able to fix
I can see guys feeling like I felt about myself at different times in my life. Like I'm a failure.
Yeah.
And like going out there, by God, I got a family. I'm going to push through this. And I was on food stamps for a while until I got caught up. I was lucky. I had to borrow one house payment from my father-in-law, and I paid him back later when I got on the fire department and got a decent wage. I started to get caught up.
Well, when you got to Colorado and that guy said, I don't know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And
the bottom just fell out.
Right. But you could have walked away from that just an angry person, right? But instead, you got him to give you a job anyway, even if he didn't remember it, right? And you just moved on from there.
And it didn't hurt when he said, it shocked me.
Right.
But I thought, this guy doesn't remember. And I says, I was here 2 months ago and we talked about it. And I had so many years experience in Chrysler products. He goes, oh yeah, now I remember. Well, we can clear a stall out and start you Monday.
But you could have just walked away pissed off and never got a job.
Well,
but you didn't. You just talked to the guy.
I guess I looked at it like he didn't do it on purpose.
Right.
He made a mistake. And so let's straighten it out and we'll move on from there.
Right. Yeah.
I guess the positive thinking, I guess.
Yeah.
And I had to have a job.
And it certainly works.
And now when I quit school when I went in the service, while I was aboard ship, I took correspondence courses. One on auto mechanics, one on commercial, or that was later, one on aircraft engines. And then when I got on the fire department, I got my paramedic license. And the VA bill, I was doing cars on the side, and I got a associate's degree in commercial refrigeration, but I never used it. It was always car.
Right.
And even that I did it different. I went to factory schools, 6 schools. I had slipped inside a car door and cut 5 tendons. So I couldn't work for several weeks. I had a cast on my arm and all that. And so I went to my manager at the dealer. I said, can you send me to any Chrysler schools? Because I can't work. I may as well go to school.
Right.
So I took whatever they had. I learned 16-speed Spicer transmissions for semi-trucks, commercial refrigeration again, cruise controls, electrical systems, and all. Took all the schooling I could get. And when I was going to the community college, I sent a letter to my mom. I said, look, I'm on the dean's list. And
was she surprised?
Said, now, this is how early I started out.
Yeah.
She says, the first time I caught you skipping school was kindergarten. Well, back in the 40s, boys' shorts looked like girls' shorts. They were flared at the bottom. And I was teasing the hell out of the other boys, look like you're wearing a skirt. And I just giving them hell. And I came home one day, my mom got this pair of shorts, and she says, look, I got you for this hot weather. And it's like Macaulay in that Home Alone.
Yeah.
And, oh my God. And so we lived in the middle of the block. I went to the end of the street and I just played around. And time when the kids were getting out of school, I came on home. Mom says, Well, how was school? Same old thing. Well, our kitchen window was in that direction. Once in a while, she'd see me playing. She knew I was okay, so she just kept an eye on me. But she caught me. Then I got smart. I went around the corner when I skipped school.
Right.
But I started skipping school in kindergarten. I wanted to march my own band.
Well, and it's interesting that you skipped school. We started out this conversation with I hated school, but yet you liked education, right?
Yeah, because, on my terms.
Right, on your terms, or if you were interested in it.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's a quirk or, to me, it felt like a blessing, because I'd always tell them, I ain't got no need for English.
Right.
I can speak it, you understand. Now, my wife knows a little bit of French, very little, and some word will come up and I'll butcher it up. And she says, pronounce that way. And I say, yeah, well, whatever.
Good for you, right?
Or I'll butcher a word up on purpose, just to mess with her.
Yeah.
And half the time, the only problem I run into is sometimes she thinks I'm serious and I'm joking.
Yeah.
And, but she's a very caring person. How she puts up with me is beyond me, but I've been a happy camper, and my ex-wife was a good person too.
Right.
And she's gotten involved with things like La Casa, and since I left, but and the poor gal, I'll probably never get remarried. Well, 2 years after I got married, like 2 years after we split up, and she got married a year or so later. One day off from what we got married.
Oh my God.
And she married a guy that was retired Army or something like that. And I met him. He was kind of weird. He was just going overboard, complimenting her all the time. And I thought, boy, he sounds so insecure of himself,
right,
and all that. Well, he wound up getting prostate cancer and died 2 years after they were married. And then she went 4 or 5 years, and now she's hooked up. I don't know if you're familiar with Colorado Springs, but north by the Academy, it's all pine trees, really wooded. It's called Black Forest, and they're minimum 5-acre plots. And she's married to a guy who was a rodeo cowboy.
Oh.
So he's on a walker, his back's
right,
screwed up and everything.
Right.
But he treats her good. She loves it being in the woods, and there's no underbrush. You get a pine forest, there's very little brush out there. And they got a couple horses and wild cats and shit like that. And she's enjoying life. But he's pretty stove up, but he treats her good. And my daughter lives in Colorado Springs. My son's in Tucson. But I'll ask her, how's your mom doing now? When my grandson, my son's boy, graduated from Air Force boot camp, we all met in San Antonio. And, there's my ex-wife and her sister and all that. And we got along good. And one time, I had the summer off and all that, and I thought, I'm going to go out to, I had retired.
Yeah.
And finally, it's 10, 12 years ago, I had a pickup, and I said, I'll just sleep in the back. I want to drive out to Colorado and visit some of the guys on the fire department, my fishing buddies and that. So I'm out there, it wound up, I was gone like 40 days.
Oh.
She called me, you come back. Oh yeah, shit. But I was out there, and then there was a class reunion. I went to it, and somebody says, your sister and brother-in-law are going to be there. Is that going to be okay? I said, not a problem. I says, I was out fishing 2 weeks ago with my brother-in-law.
Because everybody just gets along, right?
And he got cancer and died. It's just crazy, but I went out, hung around with a bunch of guys I did on the fire department, did some fishing, and then I just lost. I was having so much fun, I lost track of time.
Well, you're out there living your best life. So, we're kind of coming to the close of our conversation, and it's always great to get to know people, but your life has been very, very interesting, and the things that you've done, and just the theme of service in all that you do for other people. As we come to the close, I always ask people the same question, and that question is, when people listen to this conversation that we're having today, whether it's a week from now or 100 years from now, what would you want them to take away from your life and how you've lived it?
Don't hang around with negative people. Mm-hmm. My dad always told me, when you're forced with a decision, do what's right. If you were raised properly, you know what's right. It doesn't have to be written down in a law or the Ten Commandments. And treat other people like you want to be treated, with respect. And enjoy life. You don't know if you've got a tomorrow coming or not.
Right.
And if you got a bad past, it's past. Keep that in mind. It's gone. You can't redo it. So make the best of your future. That's all I can say about that, I guess.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for sitting down and talking with me, Dennis.
Well, you're more than welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Veterans Archives podcast, where every veteran story is honored and celebrated. Join us as we explore the rich histories and experiences of those who have served our nation. You can catch our podcasts on all major podcast platforms, as well as every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wreaths Across America Radio. At Veterans Archives, we believe your story matters. Visit our website at www.veteransarchives.org to discover more about our mission, access resources for veterans, and stay updated on upcoming episodes. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn to engage with our community. Subscribe, like, and share to spread awareness about our veterans' stories. Whether you're a veteran, a supporter, or simply curious about the profound journeys of those who have served, Veterans Archives invites you to listen in, learn, and be inspired. Join us as we continue to honor and preserve the legacies of our veterans. Remember, your story matters. Visit us online today at www.veteransarchives.org and connect with us on social media and stay informed and engaged. And as always, thank you for your support.